I used to think I was lucky to get promoted in a boardroom full of men in suits. But the only thing I'd really climbed was onto their chessboard. I didn't know that the contract I'd signed 3 years earlier would be the weapon that brought everything crashing down. Or the hook I'd use to drag the CEO to hell with me. My name is Aubrey Thorne. And at 34, I was the only woman in the C-suite at Virexon Dynamics, a tech conglomerate sprawling across 3 glass towers in downtown Denver. For 5 years, I'd carved my way through the corporate maze, turning quarterly disasters into miraculous recoveries. Until Mason Carr himself, our untouchable CEO, tapped me for Chief Financial Officer. I remember that promotion day like a fever dream. The boardroom smelled of leather and old coffee. 18 men in identical charcoal suits nodding as Mason announced my new position. Aubrey has proven herself indispensable, he'd said, his smile sharp as broken glass. She's exactly what Virexon needs to navigate our expansion. The applause felt hollow even then, but I was too drunk on ambition to notice the trap closing around me. For 3 years, I'd been their golden girl. When our Singapore merger threatened to implode, I flew out on 4 hours' notice and salvaged it. When the SEC came sniffing around our cryptocurrency ventures, I presented numbers so clean they practically sparkled. I worked 18-hour days, missed my sister's wedding, and learned to speak the peculiar dialect of corporate warfare, where interesting perspective meant you're wrong, and let's circle back meant this conversation is over. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday morning in March. I'd arrived at 6:30 as usual, but my key card wouldn't open the executive floor. Security apologized, said it was a system glitch, and let me through. Inside my office, I found a stack of documents I didn't remember requesting. Acquisition papers for a company called Meridian Solutions, with my digital signature on every page. Just reviewing old files, Mason's voice made me jump. He stood in my doorway, coffee in hand, that same sharp smile playing at his lips. I haven't seen these before, I said, flipping through the papers. The signature looked perfect, but I knew I'd never signed them. Must be from the archives. You know how thorough you were during the Meridian evaluation? He sipped his coffee, watching me over the rim. The board's been asking about some of our historical decisions. Nothing to worry about. But worry had already taken root in my chest, a cold weight that grew heavier as the weeks passed. More documents appeared, expense reports I'd never filed, emails I'd never sent, all bearing my unmistakable digital footprint. I started keeping copies of everything, scanning documents to my personal drive each night before leaving the office. The second crack came during the quarterly board meeting. I was presenting our financial forecast when board member Harrison Vance interrupted. Aubrey, can you explain the discrepancy in the Q4 technology infrastructure spending? I pulled up the slides I'd prepared, but they weren't mine. The numbers were off by millions, showing massive overruns I'd never approved. This isn't the presentation I submitted, I said, fingers trembling as I clicked through foreign slides. It's what we received, Vance said, his tone suggesting I was either incompetent or lying. Mason stepped in smoothly. Let's table this discussion. Aubrey's been under tremendous pressure. Perhaps she needs some time to review her records. After the meeting, I locked myself in my office and pulled up my original files. They were gone, replaced by the corrupted versions. Even my backup drives showed the false numbers. Someone with system-level access had rewritten my digital history. The third crack shattered everything. The call came at 2 a.m. on a Sunday. Ms. Thorne, this is Davies from security. We need you to come in immediately. There's been an incident. I drove through empty Denver streets, my hands gripping the wheel until my knuckles went white. The office blazed with light, unusual for a weekend. In the boardroom, I found Mason, the entire board, and a team of lawyers I'd never seen before. Sit down, Aubrey, Mason said, his voice gentle as a funeral director's. The lead lawyer, a woman with steel gray hair and cold eyes, slid a folder across the table. Ms. Thorne, we've discovered systematic falsification of financial records spanning 18 months. The evidence points directly to you. Inside the folder, emails I'd never written. authorizing ghost transactions, bank records showing deposits to accounts I'd never opened. And at the bottom, a whistleblower report filed by someone in my own department, claiming I'd threatened them to stay quiet. "This is insane," I said, but my voice sounded small in that vast room. "Mason, you know me. I would never." "The evidence is overwhelming." He cut me off. "Effective immediately. You're suspended pending investigation. Security will escort you out. You're not to contact any Virexon employees or access any company systems." As they marched me through those familiar halls, past the desk where I'd spent countless nights, past the achievements I'd bled for, I finally understood. This wasn't a mistake or misunderstanding. I'd been chosen as a sacrifice. And Mason Carr had lit the pyre himself. The security guard wouldn't meet my eyes as he watched me pack my personal items into a cardboard box. 15 minutes to erase 3 years. A photo of my parents, a stress ball shaped like a dollar sign, a joke gift from my team last Christmas, and a coffee mug that read, "World's Okayest CFO." The irony burned. "I'm sorry, Mizzy Thorne," the guard mumbled as we reached the parking garage. "Always liked working your floor. You remembered our names." By the time I got home, the news had already broken. My phone exploded with notifications. Virexon CFO suspended in massive fraud scandal. The articles used words like alleged and investigation pending. But the photos they'd chosen, me looking tired at a conference, hair disheveled, told a different story. I was already guilty in the court of public opinion. The first call came from my sister in Portland. "Aubrey, what the hell is happening? Mom just saw you on CNN." "It's not true," I said, but the words felt meaningless. How do you explain a conspiracy to someone who's never worked in a place where smiles hide knives? Within hours, my professional world evaporated. LinkedIn connections quietly disappeared. Former colleagues who'd texted me daily about everything from budget reports to their kids' soccer games went silent. When I called Patricia, my deputy CFO and closest work friend, she answered on the first ring. "I can't talk to you," she whispered. "They're monitoring everything. I'm sorry." The line went dead. My corporate credit cards were frozen. The company laptop remotely wiped itself while I watched. 3 years of work vanishing into digital smoke. Even my parking pass for the downtown garage was deactivated. Virexon was surgically removing me from existence. The lawyer Mason had recommended. Thomas Fitzgerald from the company's preferred firm arrived that evening. He wore a sympathetic expression like an expensive suit. "The board wants to handle this quietly," he said, spreading documents across my kitchen table. "If you cooperate fully, admit to some lesser charges, we can minimize the damage. Maybe avoid criminal prosecution. Admit to something I didn't do. The evidence is substantial. Aubrey, email threads, financial transfers, even security footage of you accessing systems at unusual hours." He slid a photo across the table, me at my desk at 2 a.m., a timestamp I remembered because I'd been fixing Mason's mess with the Tokyo acquisition. A jury would convict based on this alone. That's when the nausea hit. Every late night, every emergency I'd handled, every time I'd gone above and beyond, it had all been twisted into evidence against me. I'd been building my own gallows with my dedication. "Get out," I said. "Aubrey, be reasonable. Get out." After Fitzgerald left, I sat in my dark apartment, laptop open, scrolling through news articles that painted me as either a criminal mastermind or a cautionary tale about women promoted beyond their capabilities. The comments were worse, strangers dissecting my appearance, my personal life, creating narratives from nothing. Someone had even found my college yearbook photo and turned it into a meme. That's when I noticed something odd in one article's comments section. A username, Truth in Contracts 47. Their comment was buried deep. "Check Clause 9. They always forget about Clause 9. I almost dismissed it as nonsense, but something nagged at me. At 3 a.m., I pulled out the external drive I'd hidden in my freezer. Yes, the freezer. Because paranoia had become my new religion. On it, I'd saved personal copies of every major document from my early days at Virexine, including my original employment contract, page by page. I combed through the legal jargon until I found it. Clause 9. Protection of executive personnel. My eyes strained in the laptop's glow as I read, in the event that an executive-level employee becomes subject to internal investigation for financial irregularities, said employee shall be entitled to full legal protection and independent investigation if a. Evidence suggests potential coercion or falsification of documents by senior leadership. B. The employee has not been given reasonable opportunity to review and respond to allegations. Or C. There exists a pattern of similar allegations against other executive personnel within a 5-year period. My heart hammered. This wasn't just boilerplate. This was a weapon hidden in plain sight. I started digging through everything I'd saved. Old emails, departed employee LinkedIn profiles, corporate announcements from years past. At 5 a.m., I found him. Marcus Webb, former CFO, my predecessor. The official story was that he'd left for personal reasons, but a deep dive into archived news articles told a different story. Accusations of embezzlement. A quiet resignation. No criminal charges ever filed. The pattern went deeper. Before Marcus, there was Jennifer Huang, VP of Strategic Development, similar accusations, similar sudden departure. Before her, David Aronson from Legal. Always high-level employees who'd served their purpose or asked too many questions. Always financial crimes that somehow never made it to actual court. As dawn broke over Denver, I understood the game. Mason Carr wasn't just a CEO. He was a predator who'd turned corporate governance into a hunting ground. And I was just the latest prey. But prey can bite back. I closed my laptop and reached for my phone. I needed a real lawyer. Someone who'd never taken a dime from Virexon. Someone who understood that sometimes the conspiracy theories are just conspiracies, and sometimes they're business as usual. The war was just beginning, and I finally knew which weapons to use. Finding a lawyer who hadn't been contaminated by Virexon's money proved harder than I'd expected. The first 3 firms I called suddenly had conflicts of interest. The 4th actually laughed. You want to take on Mason Carr? Good luck with that, sweetheart. On day 4 of my exile, while stress-eating cereal at 2 p.m., I found Riley Hart. She wasn't in any legal directory. I discovered her through a 3-year-old Reddit thread about corporate whistleblowers. Former federal prosecutor. Quit after her boss buried a case against a pharmaceutical giant. Now she operated from a cramped office above a Vietnamese restaurant in Aurora, taking cases the white shoe firms wouldn't touch. Clause 9, she said, reading my contract for the 3rd time. Holy shit, sorry, holy crap, I'm trying to curse less. She spun in her chair, energized in a way that made me simultaneously hopeful and terrified. Do you know how rare this is? Most companies bury protective clauses and amendments or remove them entirely. But this is from Virexon's original incorporation documents. They probably forgot it existed. So it's useful? Useful? Riley grinned, and I saw why prosecutors had feared her. This is a corporate nuclear weapon. But we need more than just the clause. We need proof of the pattern. We spent the next 2 weeks building our case in her cluttered office, surrounded by boxes of documents and empty coffee cups. Riley had a contact at the Denver Post who'd covered Marcus Webb's departure. Through him, we tracked down Marcus himself, now living in Michigan and working as a high school math teacher. I won't testify, Marcus said over Skype, his face drawn. I signed an NDA. They'll destroy me. They already destroyed you, Riley pointed out. No, they let me leave with some dignity. If I speak up now... He shook his head. I have a family. I'm sorry. Aubrey. I really am. But Marcus did something better than testify. After we disconnected, he sent a single email. Check the Morrison Group audit from 2019, page 847. The Morrison Group audit was publicly available, buried in Virexon's SEC filings. Page 847 contained a footnote so small I needed to zoom in 400% to read it. Executive departures in fiscal years 2017-2019 resulted in aggregate settlement payments of $38.7 million, authorized solely by CEO signature. $38 million in hush money. Riley whistled. That's a lot of buried bodies. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. I was grocery shopping, hood up, sunglasses on like a discount celebrity, when someone touched my shoulder. I spun around to find Amanda Kim, Mason's executive assistant. "Don't make a scene," she said quietly, pretending to examine avocados. "I can't be seen with you." "Amanda. Produce aisle, 5 minutes." She walked away. I spent those 5 minutes convinced I was walking into another trap. But when I found her by the organic bananas, her hands were shaking. "I heard him," she said without preamble. "Last week, before they suspended you. He was on a call with legal." She pulled out her phone, glanced around, then handed it to me. "I started recording after he said your name." The audio was muffled but clear enough. Mason's voice. "Doesn't matter what she knows. Once we execute the plan, she'll be too busy defending herself to dig deeper. Just make sure the Meridian documents are backdated properly. And for God's sake, make sure she never figures out about Clause 9. A man's voice responded. "The clause has been dormant for 15 years. No one even knows." "I don't care if it's been dormant since the Jurassic period," Mason snapped. "If she finds it, if she understands what it actually means, we're all fucked. So make sure she's buried before she gets curious." Amanda took her phone back. "He's done this before. Jennifer, David, Marcus. I scheduled the meetings where he planned their exits. I thought they were just corporate restructuring. Why are you helping me?" Her laugh was bitter. "Because last month, he asked me to start building a file on Janet Chen, the new VP of Operations. She's been asking too many questions about the Meridian acquisition." Amanda met my eyes. "I have a daughter. I don't want her growing up thinking this is normal." "We need you to testify," I said. "I can't. But I can do something else." She pulled a flash drive from her pocket. "Every email Mason sent regarding personnel issues for the last 5 years, I'm supposed to purge them quarterly. But I never did. Call it insurance. This is, Amanda, this could be illegal. So is framing innocent people." She pressed the drive into my hand. "I'm flying to Seoul tomorrow. My mother's sick. At least, that's what I'm telling HR. I won't be back for at least a month, maybe longer." "Amanda. Make him pay. Aubrey. For all of us." That night, Riley and I sat in her office, the flash drive between us like a live grenade. "If we use this, they'll come after us for corporate espionage," she said. "If we don't, they'll keep doing this. Janet Chen is next. After her, someone else." Riley nodded slowly. "Then we better make sure our first shot counts. Because once we reveal we know about Clause 9, once we show our hand, Mason will unleash everything he has." I thought about Amanda on a plane to Seoul, Marcus teaching algebra in Michigan, Jennifer and David and all the others who'd been crushed under Mason's designer shoes. "Then we better make it count," I said, and plugged in the drive. The war chest was full. Now we just had to fire the first shot. The preliminary hearing was set for a Tuesday morning in May. Riley had filed our response invoking Clause 9, and the legal earthquake was immediate. Virexen's army of lawyers filed motion after motion trying to get it dismissed, claiming everything from procedural errors to questioning my mental fitness. Judge Patricia Hawthorne denied them all. "Your client wanted her day in court," Riley told Fitzgerald when we passed in the courthouse hallway. "Careful what you wish for." But Mason wasn't relying solely on legal channels. The attacks came from every direction, each more vicious than the last. First, my bank accounts were frozen. Not by court order, someone had reported suspicious activity, claiming I was preparing to flee the country. It took Riley 3 days to get them unfrosted. 3 days where I survived on the $20 in my wallet and the kindness of my neighbor who accidentally ordered too much Chinese food. Then came the doxing. My address, phone number, and even my gym membership details splashed across anonymous forums. Pizza deliveries I hadn't ordered, repair services for problems I didn't have. At 3 a.m., someone called in a gas leak at my apartment building. We all stood in the parking lot while firefighters searched for a leak that didn't exist. My neighbors shooting me looks that said they knew exactly who was to blame. "They're trying to break you," Riley said after the fifth false police report. "Make you crack before we get to court." "It's working," I admitted, exhausted beyond measure. The lowest blow came through my friend Sarah. We'd known each other since college, been bridesmaids at each other's weddings. She called me crying on a Thursday night. "Aubrey, I just got served. Virexon is suing me for industrial espionage. They say I helped you steal company secrets." "That's insane. You haven't even talked to me since you got suspended." "I know. But they have emails. Aubrey. Emails between us that I never sent. Talking about confidential information I don't even understand." The pattern was familiar. Fabricated evidence, digital footprints that looked real enough to fool anyone who didn't dig deeper. They were punishing anyone who'd ever been close to me. "I have to go," Sarah said. "My lawyer says I can't contact you anymore. I'm sorry." The line went dead. Another friendship sacrificed on Mason's altar. Riley found me in her office at midnight, staring at my laptop screen. I'd been reading the emails from Amanda's flash drive for hours, cataloging Mason's predatory patterns. Each destroyed career was meticulously planned, every exit orchestrated like a corporate symphony of destruction. "You need to sleep," she said, setting down a cup of tea. "Janet Chen starts her new job Monday," I said. "In 6 months, maybe a year, she'll be sitting where I am. Unless we stop this." "We will. But not if you collapse before the hearing." I looked up at her. "Why are you doing this, Riley? Really? This case is probably costing you more than you'll ever make from it." She sat on the edge of her cluttered desk. "You know why I quit the prosecutor's office? My last case was against Pantheon Pharmaceuticals. They knowingly sold contaminated insulin, killed 37 people. I had them dead to rights, emails, lab reports, whistleblower testimony. Then my boss got a call from someone very high up. Suddenly, evidence went missing. Witnesses recanted. The case fell apart. Mason? No. But men like Mason. They're everywhere, turning corporations into their personal kingdoms, treating employees like disposable chess pieces." She met my eyes. "I couldn't save those 37 people. But maybe I can save the next Aubrey Thorne." The preliminary hearing arrived like a storm front. I wore my best suit, the one I'd bought for my CFO announcement, now tailored to fit my stress-thinned frame. The courthouse steps teemed with reporters. Someone had leaked that we were invoking an obscure contract clause, and the business press smelled blood. Inside, Mason sat with his phalanx of lawyers, impeccable in charcoal gray. He caught my eye and smiled, that same sharp smile from the boardroom, the smile that said he'd already won. Judge Hawthorne was a small woman with sharp eyes who'd spent 20 years as a corporate lawyer before taking the bench. She listened impassively as Fitzgerald laid out Virexon's case, the fabricated emails, the doctored financial records, the mysterious transfers to offshore accounts. "The evidence is overwhelming, Your Honor," he concluded. "Ms. Thorne abused her position of trust for personal gain." Then it was Riley's turn. She stood slowly, a manila folder in her hand. "Your Honor, we invoke Clause 9 of Ms. Thorne's employment contract, which entitles her to full protection and independent investigation when evidence suggests potential coercion or falsification by senior leadership." "That's an extraordinary claim," the judge said. "For an extraordinary situation." Riley opened the folder. "We have evidence of a pattern spanning 5 years. Marcus Webb, Jennifer Huang, David Aronson, all senior executives who left under similar circumstances, all accused of financial crimes. None ever prosecuted." Fitzgerald shot to his feet. "Objection? Relevance?" "Goes to pattern, Your Honor." Clause 9 specifically mentions a pattern of similar allegations against other executive personnel. I'll allow it, Riley continued, each word a carefully aimed arrow. The $38 million in settlements, the backdated documents, the digital forensics expert who'd found evidence of system-level tampering with Ms. Thorne's files. The courtroom was silent when she finished. Even Mason's smile had faded. Judge Hawthorne looked between the two legal teams. This is a serious matter. I'm ordering an immediate freeze on all actions against Miss Thorne pending a full investigation. Mr. Fitzgerald, I suggest your client prepare for some difficult questions. As we left the courthouse, Mason brushed past me. This isn't over, he whispered. You have no idea what you've started. No, I said, loud enough for the reporters to hear. But I know how it ends. The war had begun in earnest, and for the first time since that 2 a.m. phone call, I wasn't afraid. I was furious. The formal trial began 6 weeks later in downtown Denver's federal courthouse. By then, our case had evolved from a simple wrongful termination suit into something that made national headlines. The Clause 9 case, as the media called it, had become a symbol of corporate accountability. Riley had assembled our evidence like a prosecutor building a murder case. Each piece alone might be explained away, but together they painted a damning portrait of systematic abuse. We had the pattern of destroyed careers, the financial records Amanda had provided, and testimony from 3 former employees who'd finally agreed to break their NDAs. But Mason had weapons of his own. State your name for the record, Fitzgerald said to his first witness. Dr. Patricia Morse, forensic accountant. For 3 hours, Dr. Morse dissected the financial allegations against me with surgical precision. She'd found discrepancies I hadn't even known existed, tiny mathematical errors in reports I'd signed, patterns in the data that suggested deliberate manipulation. By the time she finished, even I was almost convinced I'd done something wrong. Riley's cross-examination was brutal. Dr. Morse, were you given access to the original server logs? I worked with the data provided by Virexon. That's not what I asked. Did you examine the original server logs that would show if documents had been altered after Miss Thorne's digital signature was applied? I was not provided those logs because they would show tampering. Objection. Fitzgerald called out, withdrawn. Riley smiled. No further questions. The second day brought Mason himself to the stand. He wore a navy suit and an expression of wounded betrayal. Every inch the responsible CEO forced to confront a trusted employee's deception. I mentored Aubrey, he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. Promoted her when others had doubts. To discover she'd been systematically defrauding the company, it was devastating. Fitzgerald walked him through the evidence, each answer perfectly rehearsed. Mason was brilliant. I had to give him that. He wove truth and lies so seamlessly that even I started doubting my memories. Then Riley stood for cross-examination, and I saw Mason's first flicker of uncertainty. Mr. Carr, let's discuss Clause 9. I'm not familiar with every clause in every employee contract, he said smoothly. Riley produced a document. This is an email from you to legal, dated 3 weeks before Ms. Thorne's suspension. You wrote, and I quote, make sure she never figures out about Clause 9. Can you explain? The courtroom went silent. Mason's lawyer started to object, but Mason waved him off. That's taken out of context. We were discussing various contract provisions. Were you also discussing contract provisions when you said, if she finds it, if she understands what it actually means, we're all fucked? Mason's face went pale. Where did you... That's privileged communication. Actually, it's not, Riley said calmly. Not when it's evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud. Your Honor, I'd like to play Defense Exhibit 47. The audio filled the courtroom, Mason's voice, clear and damning. I watched the jury's faces change as they listened. The careful facade Mason had built crumbled with each word. That recording was obtained illegally, Fitzgerald protested. It was provided by a concerned employee who feared for her safety. Riley countered, "We can discuss the whistleblower protections that apply, if you'd like." Judge Hawthorne nodded. "I'll allow it." The rest of Mason's testimony was a disaster. He tried to explain, to contextualize, to deny, but Riley had him trapped. Each question revealed another lie, another manipulation. By the time he stepped down, his designer suit was soaked with sweat. Our strongest evidence came on day 3. Riley called Marcus Webb to the stand. He'd finally agreed to testify after his wife convinced him that living in fear was no life at all. "They destroyed me," Marcus said simply. "Same playbook as Aubrey. Fabricated evidence, frozen accounts, threats against my family. I took their money and ran because I had 2 kids and a mortgage. I've regretted it every day since." Jennifer Huang testified via video link from Vancouver. David Aronson flew in from Boston. Each told the same story with different details: the careful grooming, the sudden betrayal, the systematic destruction of their careers. "Why didn't you invoke Clause 9? Riley asked each of them. "I didn't know it existed," was the universal answer. "By the time I might have found it, I was too broken to fight." But the testimony that broke the case came from an unexpected source. On day 4, Amanda Kim walked into the courtroom. "You're supposed to be in Seoul," I whispered to Riley. "She came back," Riley whispered back. "Said she couldn't live with herself if she didn't." Amanda took the stand with quiet dignity. She'd worked for Mason for 7 years, she said. She'd scheduled the meetings, typed the memos, watched him destroy career after career. "Why didn't you speak up sooner?" Riley asked gently. "Because I was terrified. Because I have a daughter. Because I told myself it wasn't my responsibility." Amanda's voice cracked. "But when I saw him doing it to Aubrey, when I heard him planning the next victim, I realized my silence made me complicit." She detailed everything: the secret meetings, the off-the-books legal consultations, the pattern of targeting employees who asked too many questions or gained too much influence. She'd kept records, she said, because she'd learned from Mason that documentation was power. "Did Mr. Carr ever discuss Clause 9? Riley asked. "Once, he called it his nightmare scenario. Said it was a relic from when Virexin actually cared about protecting employees. He laughed about how none of his targets had ever found it." Fitzgerald's cross-examination was harsh, but Amanda held firm. She'd brought receipts, literally, emails, calendar entries, even handwritten notes from meetings where Mason had planned his attacks. When court adjourned that day, Mason's legal team looked shaken. The next morning, they asked for a meeting in judges' chambers. "My clients are prepared to discuss a settlement," Fitzgerald said, but I was past settling. "No." "Aubrey," Riley warned, "you should hear them out." "No," I repeated. "He doesn't get to buy his way out of this. Not again." Judge Hawthorne nodded. Then we proceed to closing arguments. The war wasn't over, but the battlefield had shifted. For the first time in months, I felt something I'd almost forgotten: hope. Riley's closing argument was a masterpiece of controlled fury. She stood before the jury, no notes, no theatrics, just truth delivered like hammer blows. "Clause 9 exists for exactly this situation," she began. "When a corporation becomes so corrupt that it weaponizes its own systems against employees. When a CEO treats human careers like disposable assets. When speaking truth becomes a firing offense." She walked them through the evidence: the pattern of destruction, the fabricated documents, the calculated cruelty. But her most powerful moment came when she held up my original employment contract. "Virexon wrote this clause. They promised protection. Then they bet that their employees would be too broken, too scared, or too ignorant to use it. They were wrong." Fitzgerald's closing was desperate. He attacked Amanda's credibility, questioned the authenticity of the recording, tried to paint me as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge. But the jury had heard too much. His words bounced off their skeptical faces like rain off stone. The verdict came back in 3 hours. As the foreman stood, my heart hammered so hard I thought everyone must hear it. On the charge of wrongful termination, we find for the plaintiff. On the charge of defamation, we find for the plaintiff. On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud, we find for the plaintiff. The number they awarded in damages made headlines: $57 million. But the real victory came next. Furthermore, Judge Hawthorne said, this court finds sufficient evidence of systemic corporate malfeasance to warrant immediate investigation by federal authorities. I am referring this case to the SEC and the Department of Justice. Mason's face went gray. Criminal charges were now on the table, but the earthquake was just beginning. Within hours of the verdict, Virexon's stock price plummeted 30%. By morning, 3 major institutional investors had called emergency meetings. The board convened at 6 a.m., and by noon, they'd voted. Mason Carr was suspended pending investigation. The next domino fell when the Wall Street Journal published Amanda's leaked emails on their front page. The Clause 9 files, they called it. Other victims started coming forward, not just from Virexon, but from Mason's previous companies. The pattern went back 15 years. A week later, Riley and I sat in her office, sharing Chinese takeout and watching the news. Federal agents were carrying boxes out of Virexon's headquarters. Mason's assets had been frozen. 3 board members had already resigned. You did it, Riley said, raising her beer. We did it, I corrected, though I'm not sure what it is yet. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Ms. Thorne, this is Sandra Watson from the Virexon board. Well, what's left of it? We'd like to discuss something with you. If this is about a settlement, no, it's about a job. We need a new CEO. Someone with unimpeachable integrity who understands our culture but isn't tainted by it. Someone who's proven they'll fight for what's right. I nearly dropped the phone. You're offering me Mason's job. We're offering you the chance to fix what he broke. Interested? I looked at Riley, who was gesturing wildly and mouthing, say yes. I'll think about it, I said, and hung up. You'll think about it. Riley threw a fortune cookie at me. They just offered you the ultimate revenge. But it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about the next Jennifer, the next Marcus, the next person who'd be destroyed if systems didn't change. 2 days later, federal prosecutors announced 27 criminal charges against Mason Carr, ranging from fraud to racketeering. His lawyer claimed he'd fight every charge, but when agents arrested him at his country club, he looked like a man who knew the game was over. The civil suits started rolling in immediately. Every executive Mason had destroyed over the years saw their chance for justice. Virexon's insurance would cover some of it, but Mason's personal assets were fair game. His $40 million mansion, his yacht collection, his private jet, all frozen pending litigation. I took the CEO job, but not for revenge. I took it to dismantle Mason's machinery of destruction and build something better. My first act was to void every NDA related to personnel matters. My second was to establish an anonymous ethics hotline that reported directly to an independent board committee. But my favorite moment came during my first all-hands meeting. I stood where Mason had once held court, looking out at hundreds of employees who'd lived in fear for years. I want to read you something, I said, holding up a document. It's called Clause 9. It says that when leadership fails you, when the system turns predatory, you have the right to fight back. It's been hiding in your contracts all along. I paused, meeting their eyes. From now on, it won't be hiding. It'll be posted in every break room, on every floor. Because the only power people like Mason Carr have is the power we don't know we possess. The applause started slowly, then built to thunder. In the crowd, I spotted Patricia, my former deputy, tears streaming down her face. Janet Chen stood near the back, the woman who'd almost been next, nodding with grim satisfaction. 6 months later, Mason Carr was convicted on 19 counts. The judge, citing the systematic nature of his crimes and his complete lack of remorse, sentenced him to 15 years in federal prison. They led him away in handcuffs, that sharp smile finally, permanently, gone. I didn't attend the sentencing. I was too busy working, really working, not playing corporate games, building something better from the ashes of what Mason had burned, sometimes late at night in the executive office that used to be his. I think about that morning he smiled at me over coffee and said I had nothing to worry about. He was right, in a way. I didn't have anything to worry about. He did. He just didn't know it yet. 5 years have passed since I sat in that courtroom, watching my carefully constructed life crumble around me. 5 years since Mason Carr tried to bury me with the same shovel he'd used on so many others. Today, I'm writing this from a very different place. Not the corner office at Virexon, which I left after 3 years of rebuilding, but from the headquarters of the Clause 9 Foundation. We started small, just Riley and me in a rented space smaller than my old Virexon office. Our mission was simple: provide legal support to employees facing corporate retaliation. What we didn't expect was the flood. Hundreds, then thousands of messages from people trapped in their own versions of my nightmare. Middle managers in Miami being framed for theft. Engineers in Seattle discovering backdated performance reviews. Accountants in Detroit finding digital signatures on documents they'd never seen. The foundation now has offices in 12 cities and a team of 40 lawyers who've taken on the mission Riley started, fighting for the people corporations try to crush. We've won 73 cases and counting. Each victory is another crack in the wall of corporate impunity. Mason Carr serves his time in a minimum security facility in Colorado. I drove past it once, not to gloat, but to remind myself that justice, however delayed, is possible. He'll be eligible for parole in another 4 years. His lawyers send periodic letters suggesting he might sue me for defamation. Riley frames them and hangs them in what she calls her Hall of Shame. The others found their own paths to healing. Marcus Webb returned to finance, this time as CFO of a nonprofit that provides microloans to small businesses. Jennifer Huang started a consulting firm specializing in corporate ethics training. Virexon was her first client after my reforms. Amanda Kim became our foundation's head of research, documenting patterns of corporate abuse with the same meticulous care she once used to schedule Mason's attacks. Patricia, my former deputy, took over as CFO when I became CEO. She told me once that watching my trial gave her the courage to speak up when her husband's company tried to silence a safety whistleblower. "You showed me that contracts aren't just weapons for corporations," she said. "Sometimes they're shields for the rest of us." The corporate world has started to change, slowly, reluctantly, but inevitably. After the Clause 9 case, employment lawyers across the country began combing through old contracts, finding similar protections that had been forgotten or deliberately obscured. 3 states have passed Clause 9 laws requiring companies to clearly disclose all employee protections. It's not enough, but it's a start. Last month, I received an unexpected visitor. Thomas Fitzgerald, Mason's former lawyer, stood in my foundation office looking older, grayer, somehow smaller. "I owe you an apology," he said without preamble. I knew. Maybe not all of it, but enough. I told myself I was just doing my job, representing my client. But that's what everyone tells themselves, isn't it? Just doing their job while lives get destroyed. I could have thrown him out, could have savored the moment. Instead, I offered him coffee and listened as he unburdened himself about 15 years of helping Mason bury bodies. When he left, he carried application forms for our foundation's pro bono panel. Redemption comes in strange packages sometimes. The hardest part of this journey hasn't been the legal battles or the public scrutiny. It's been learning to trust again, to sign contracts without reading them 17 times, to accept a promotion without wondering what trap I'm walking into, to believe that not every smile hides a knife. But I'm learning. Therapy helps. So does the work, every person we help. Every employee who finds their Clause 9, every corporation forced to think twice before destroying someone's life. It's not revenge anymore. It's bigger than that. Sometimes young professionals ask me if I regret taking that CFO position at Virexon. If I wish I'd seen the signs earlier, recognized the trap before it closed. I tell them the truth. I regret nothing. Because that trap, That betrayal, that moment when I thought I'd lost everything, it led me here. To this work, to this purpose. Mason Carr thought he was teaching me a lesson about power. He was right, just not in the way he intended. He taught me that power isn't about who can destroy the most lives or manipulate the most documents. Real power is in knowing your rights, understanding your worth, and refusing to let anyone, no matter how many lawyers they have, convince you otherwise. I keep a copy of my original Virexon contract in my desk drawer. Clause 9 highlighted in yellow, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A reminder that sometimes the weapons used against us can become our salvation. That buried in the fine print of our lives. There might be a forgotten clause that changes everything. You just have to know where to look. And more importantly, you have to be willing to fight. The last time I saw Mason was in a news report about prison reform. He was teaching a financial literacy class to other inmates, court-ordered community service. The reporter asked him about his fall from grace. "I was a different person then," he said, staring directly at the camera. "I've learned that when you build your empire on others' destruction, eventually you become the ruins." I turned off the TV. I had work to do. Another email had just come in. Another employee facing their Mason Carr, needing their Clause 9. The war never really ends. It just finds new battlefields. But now, at least, we know how to fight. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with those of you who faced your own corporate battles or know someone who has. I'm curious. Where are you listening from? Drop a comment below and let me know what city or country you're in. I love connecting with people from around the world who understand that sometimes the most important fights happen in conference rooms, not courtrooms. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts or experiences in the comments. Have you ever found your own Clause 9? Let's talk about it. Until next time. Remember, read your contracts, know your rights, and never let them bury you without a fight.